Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to go over the heads we pulled off our LQ4 and go over a couple things that we need to take a look at before you would just take these and throw them back on your vehicle. Now, I'll get this out of the way right now. We are not going to be reusing these heads on our build. These are the 317 heads, and they're not very sought after because the combustion chamber on these is, I think, they're like 72, 73 cc's. They are the biggest combustion chamber on pretty much any of the LS engines as far as that goes, which means that's going to lower your compression ratio. Luckily, the 97X already has 243 heads on it, which have a smaller combustion chamber, so we're going to use those when the time comes. But for today's purpose in this video is we're going to take a look at our valve guide wear and our valve stem wear and determine if you're going to end up having to do a valve job on this or if you can get away with just taking it to the machine shop and having them resurface the head itself. So let's get into it. So we're going to get into it, starting off with the tools we're going to use today. We're going to use a micrometer, and we're going to use a small hole gauge, or more formally known as a split ball gauge. We're going to use the split ball gauge to measure our valve guides, and we're going to use our micrometer to measure our valve stem. Of course, we will use the micrometer to get the reading off of the split ball, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. So similarly to how we measured our cylinders, we're going to do kind of the same thing here. We're going to take three different measurements on the valve itself, and we're going to take three different measurements on the valve guide, and that will give us the numbers that we're looking for. Okay, so just like any other calibrated equipment, we're going to make sure that this guy is calibrated. So grab your ratchet stop here at the end, back it up a few times or a few turns, run it back down until it clicks. Then take a reading. Obviously, we zeroed out, so we know that this is calibrated and it's not off. Now, if it was off, these actually come with tools that you'd stick in this hole right here and rotate the drum, which is this guy right here that has these numbers on the back side, until everything lines up with zero, so you can recalibrate it. So we're going to back this guy off and then start on the top of the valve stem. Just like in our cylinders, when I say top, middle, and bottom, I'm not talking about physically the top and the bottom. We're only concerned with where it's writing within that valve guide. So usually there's a little bit of a discoloration on the valve. It's probably going to be very difficult for you guys to see. Obviously, this is the bottom because we've got the buildup right here. So that's as far as it's going into the valve guide from the combustion chamber side. And then usually you'll have a little bit of discoloration, which is about right here. So this is going to be the portions that we're measuring of our valve stem. I'm going to lock that guy down and take our reading. Alrighty, so we are already at, let me flip this back over here. Whoa, too many numbers written down already. So on the top of our valve stem here, we're reading 0.3. Let's see, that's not quite at 25. So we've got 10, 11, 12, 13. And then you can't add these guys as thousandths. These are 10 thousandths. So they're going to be our fourth digit place marker here. So even though we're not quite at 15, we're technically in between 13 and 14 here on our on our thousandths. This is going to be our 10 thousandths. So we're going to add that to the back. So what you do with this guy is follow these lines around until these match up with whatever line is on the back of the drum here. And that's going to be your 10,000th placeholder. It looks like it's a toss up between 6 and 7. 6 is a little bit more lined up than 7, so we're going to go with 6. So 3136. Now our minimum, again, stem thickness is going to be 3130. So we're already over that. So we know, and as long as our next two measurements are within, or excuse me, over 3130, this valve would be usable. So we're going to take those two measurements now. Alrighty, again, we have 3, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then we're going to follow the back of the drum again until we get one of those lines to line up. It looks like that's going to be a 5. Then we'll do that again at the bottom. 3, 10, 11, 12, 13. We're going to follow the drum around, and we've got a 5 again. So with these three numbers, we can already tell that this valve is still usable based on that our minimum stem thickness has to be 3130. So this is still usable. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take these numbers and subtract them from the numbers we get in our valve guide to determine how worn our guide is. So let me get everything cleaned up here really quick. I'll slide the head under the camera, and then I'll show you guys how to do that. Alrighty, so now we're going to take our split ball gauge, and we're going to send that down our valve guide here. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get exactly top, middle, and bottom. But as long as you get three measurements close enough within there, you'll be fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this guy, turn it just a little bit until it starts to make contact. So you're going to use this kind of like a feeler gauge, where you're going to tighten this up until you get a little bit of a resistance. And then we're going to take our micrometer and we're going to measure this guy. I'm going to have to do this off the table here so that way I can get on it. Alrighty, so it's going to look something like this when you're all said and done with it. In the micrometer itself. Pop that guy out of there, and then take your reading. Alrighty, so at the bottom, because we're working now from combustion chamber upwards, we have 300, 15, 16, 16, and 1. So 3161. We're going to repeat that process for the middle and the bottom, or in this case, it would be the top, but from our perspective currently, it would be the bottom. Alrighty, that's 300, 300, 15, 16, and it's a toss-up between 4 and 5 10,000ths. The 4 is lined up a little bit more than the 5, so we're going to write 4. And then we're going to do that for the top portion. Okay. Alrighty, that's going to be 300, 15, 16, and 5 10,000ths. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take these two numbers and minus them. Obviously, you're going to take the bigger number and minus it by the smaller number. And then that will give us our valve guide to valve stem clearance. Alrighty, so by taking a look at our measurements here, on top of the valve we had 2 and 9 10,000ths. Same again in the middle, 2 and 9 10,000ths. And then down at the bottom we actually had 2 and 6 10,000ths. Now our maximum valve to valve guide clearance, or valve stem to valve guide clearance, is 3 and 7 10,000ths. So as it sits right now, you could run this the way it is. You wouldn't have to do anything with the valve stem or valve guides. We'll get into the valve seats here in a minute. So what I like to do for quick assurance purposes is I like to take alcohol. You can use anything you want. Carb cleaner, brake cleaner, it doesn't matter. I like using alcohol because it doesn't evaporate nearly as quickly. You're going to take that and fill your combustion chamber up. And this is going to test to see how bad the valve seats are. If this leaks out extremely quickly, you've either one, got a bent valve, or two, your seats are just completely shot. What this is ensuring is that, granted, you're going to have, there's a big difference between airtight and watertight. Something that's airtight is a lot smaller as far as a scale of something that's watertight. But what you're going to do is take a flashlight, look down in the intake port and the exhaust port, and see if there's any wetness in there. Or that's going to tell you exactly what's going on. Again, this isn't super scientific. This is just a cheap, quick way to see how bad your valve seats are. Now, since this isn't leaking out immediately, you could run this. Granted, you are going to have a little bit of an issue when it comes to a cylinder leak down test. I mean, you might lose a percentage or two, but in this current situation, you probably would be okay with just throwing these on the way it is. So in conclusion, with all the data that we gathered, technically the valve train on this is usable. So you would be safe to at least take this and throw it on your vehicle. Now, I wouldn't recommend just to throw it on your vehicle. At bare minimum, I would have the head resurfaced, because the only thing that we didn't check today was to see if it was warped. Now, an easy way to check that at home would be to take a straight edge, put it 90 degrees to the head of the mating surface of the head, shine a light underneath it, and see if you get any light that comes through. Usually on an aluminum head, you'll have some type of warpage, especially one that has higher mileage. The other thing that we didn't talk about was lapping the valves. So if you did have an issue with with the valve sealing on the seat, you could lap these at home. I do it all the time. Every time I've done a lawnmower engine, weed whacker, whatever, I've always done it. It's pretty easy to do, and it's not that difficult. Or I should say it's not too time consuming. So ignoring all of that, theoretically, yes, you could use this in its current configuration, but at bare minimum, I would at least take it to the machine shop, have the head resurfaced, and then if you don't want to pay them to lap the valves, do it yourself. 20, 30 minutes of work, you've already got it apart anyway to do this, so what's a little bit of extra time? In the next video, we'll go over the crank and the rods. This one ran a little bit long for me, and I've got some other stuff to do tonight, so I appreciate you guys. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.